Hi, I'm Brian with Pioneer Builders. Today we're going to go through some very basics on concrete flat work, specifically about the forming. Let's take a look. This is a current project that we're working on. Today's Wednesday, and actually a week and a half is when we're going to be getting concrete placed. But you might be a homeowner, you could be a professional builder, and I think it'd be good for me just to cover some of the higher level things. Keep it fairly basic, but some factors to be aware of. Maybe you're going to do the work for yourself, or maybe you're going to hire somebody else. So in this particular case, we'll talk about just a very simple illustration. Concrete starts as a fluid, it ends up as a solid. What you're basically doing is like forming for a cake, so to speak, before that cake would firm up when you bake it. So in this case, we've got our forms, and it keeps that fluid, or the liquid, from going outside of the form. Pretty basic stuff. And what you want to do is figure out where your planes are. You've got your bottom plane, you've got your top plane, whether or not those things are sloping. Again, I really don't want to get too technical into the details, just things that you may not be typically aware of thinking about. When it comes to the concrete, let's just say that you've got a 4-inch layer. Well, that's not the whole thing that you have to think about. What's it being placed on? So obviously you wouldn't want to put it directly on top of grass. So you probably want to peel back the material and then decide what you want your base to be. You might call your sub-base native soil. Again, I keep saying this, I don't want to get too deep into it, but if you know your area or you're working with a concrete guy, they hopefully know what the typical soils are underlying it. But then you might want to build it back up. So in this case, we have a couple of inches of 3/4 minus stone that we place down there. This gives us a pretty good base, and then we'll have about 4 inches of concrete. Now, if you're doing DOT work or there's some reason to go thicker, you absolutely can. We're a spec builder. We keep it pretty basic. Out in the right-of-way, sometimes you'll go 6 inches, then maybe bring it to 4 inches as you get up on the house. What is the loading? A DOT pavement section is going to have to be seeing, what, thousands of pieces of traffic every day, all sorts of weights to it. This is just a residential home. Even at its most, an SUV doesn't weigh all that much when it comes to concrete. We're not going to put any rebar in this. Sometimes that really freaks people out, but it all depends. Build to your local area, ask your contractors what they typically install. Again, we're talking about residential here. Maybe you've got a complicated set of civil designs, but all too often in our area, it isn't that complicated. So one other thing that we have going on here is the sewer comes out of the house, the sanitary waste, and then this is the clean out. This was the tie-in into the municipal discharge. So we have to have a rated piece of hardware to go over the top of it so that you can access it later. Obviously, you have to be thinking in terms of the top of this and whether or not that needs to get brought up and down, whether or not there's any excavation around, if you want to put some bar in here in order to help support and stabilize that. So there could be kind of a hole in there that the concrete would spill in and go around. Two more things that I want to hit on this particular video. One of them is how you figure out your quantity. So right now all I have is a tape measure, but you can actually use a measuring wheel, which we like to do when it comes to this type of work, and you can just run across it, get your footage. So it's length times width. You might have to do some figuring if it's more cut up into sections, then add it all together, and then times depth. So you're looking for cubic yardage when it comes to materials ordering, but you're probably, when it comes to flat work, going to pay based off of a square foot finish. So you have to think in terms of 2 dimensions as well as 3 dimensions. When it comes to ordering, you have to think about how much quantity the truck can actually haul in. So again, just a couple of things to think about. Now, what about cost? You might have excavator time, and I'm going to throw out some numbers that are not necessarily based in reality, not necessarily based on your region, but let's just say that you're paying 150 bucks an hour for machine time. Let's say that you're paying 75 bucks an hour for labor. Maybe you've got one guy raking and another guy working the, maybe it's a piece of heavy equipment. We have a culvert in here, so maybe that's 350 bucks. You've got a certain amount of tonnage that you're maybe going to be hauling in when it comes to the materials to do the overlay. So you might have materials on that end. You might have truck time that you have to factor in, so maybe that's 150 bucks an hour. Again, just kind of saying some of this off the top of the head to help you when you're planning your project to be able to budget and estimate and get yourself in the right world for what that line item in aggregate would end up looking like. And then of course you have your concrete. You don't want to measure too tight, but you want to think about how much is the whole, the total yardage, and then you need to have a little bit of waste. We'll cover that in our next video. So we covered quite a bit here in a little bit of time. The prep work, the cake forms, so to speak, and hopefully that'll help you, again, whether you're a professional builder or if you're a homeowner, so that you're a little more educated when it comes to something like concrete flat work. Well, thanks for watching. Check me out on social. I'm at Pioneer Builders Inc. on Instagram, and we'll see you next time on The Build Show.